would connect to. Yeah.
Yeah, the connection to two, like I get that a lot. I understand. I feel like that's very familiar as well.
Uh-huh.
And it's interesting because it's not a benevolence for return is the way I would describe it. Which like I feel like maybe like a three or something would be more about that recognition, but
Well, there's also, I think, something important to notice is that you might feel like there's a skew and like, oh, this type's behavior is noticeably better than this type's behavior. There's also the issue of like integrating, like the behavior you're talking about is like a positive aspect of your connection to two, whereas I think the more base three behavior would come off as
yeah, I was just pontificating. There's not
right.
even any
Yeah,
reason I was actually comparing it.
I was
Yeah.
just riffing off of it.
Yeah. But yeah, the two thing, like I get that too.
Yeah.
To my detriment sometimes, like I can probably be too generous a lot.
Uh-huh.
But I think it's that, you feel like you're in the position of power, so you don't feel like you're losing anything, or it's kind of almost
I'm not sure if
it,
this is true of all.
it is kind of a benevolence sort of situation. Like that's kind of like I don't even notice it when I'm doing it, but
Yeah.
you find yourself being the one in the position to like be benevolent. I think is almost what happens.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure this relates to all self-preservation socials, but I'd read something talking about how they enjoy being the like the benefactors of other people's like material needs or things like that. Like there's a desirability in being able to contribute, as you're talking about, like being generous or things like that. There's an enjoyment out of contributing in that way and being able to be a benefactor.
Yeah, I could see that.
Um,
But not in the way I think I don't know, just my personal experience it's very tends to be how do I put this? It tends to be contained. It tends to be not necessarily measurable, but discrete, I guess would be a good word for it. And not discrete by like subtle, I mean discrete as in like statistical, like versus continuous and
yeah,
but
I mean, you might be able to cut that down to, your desire to like contribute to others is mediated by
there's
like
an
your own
avoidance of
self-preservation.
like yeah, of like unintentional obligation, at least on my part, I would say.
Right.
That probably relates back to that like self-pres first. It's like, okay, I'm generous, but I don't ever want to get like surprised. I kind of
Right.
want to know what this is doing. I want it to be in my control. Like it's
Yeah, I totally get that.
yeah.
I have a desire to help people out and things like that, but at the same time, being more. I mean, quite frankly, 8 versus 9. I'll just go ahead and say it: being more submissive, or lacking assertion. I get like I've certainly had fears of like, oh, I'd like to help people out more, but then I don't like I don't like the idea of having a line of people with outstretched hands. Like, oh, what do you got for us now?
Right.
Um, which unfortunately can keep you from forming bonds or relationships when you have a mindset of like, oh, well, people are going to want shit from me, so I'm just going to avoid people. But I don't know. There's a really interesting there's really interesting components to all this where it's like earlier in life, I would have just felt ashamed about stuff. It's like I still do in some ways, but it's like as I read this stuff more, I'm like, oh, it's like part of the functionality, and the reason why I'm feeling this way isn't because I'm evil or something like that. It's like an unmet need. That's like it's kind of like your car running out of gas, and then you getting pissed off and start kicking the car, being like, "You evil car! How dare you stop in the middle of the road?"
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of wish I was a 7 almost. Like if I had to pick one other type to be, I think I would be a 7.
Yeah. I was talking with
But
someone, and they were saying, each type, each stacking, it's their own particular health. I think really it's like not so much you would like to be something else, it's you would like to integrate those qualities because you don't necessarily want to lose the good qualities you have.
no, but I'm actually like I'm being totally hypothetical here. I'm just saying like if I could pick another one
Yeah, no,
and
I'd
relive
totally
the life
be
or whatever, like I
I'd
could
to,
see that.
I would totally
Like
fucking be 8.
I'm way more of a 7 now than I was when I was younger,
Uh-huh.
and because I have this kind of internal theory that once you've kind of if you've stabilized once you stabilize your primary fix, then you're probably going to start uh, showing more of like the secondary and the third and stuff, or vice versa. I think that if you frustrate, if you can't stabilize it, you can hide from it in your other fixes too. But
Uh-huh.
I think optimally, I think you kind of develop them after you stabilize keep the main one fed, and it's nice and happy and kind of
Yeah.
hanging out over there. And you can go feed the next one. Because it's interesting to hear, because like let's put it this way: as when I was young, I'm much more like open and outgoing, and will do things for fun. And I wanted to when I was young, but at the same time, there was that I would give up. I never wanted to give up whatever I felt like was kind of the power of the situation or control or any. I never wanted to give up any sort of vulnerability for fun,
Uh,
except for like straight up not like straight up danger or something, but in a social sense. Like I didn't go out and party and a lot of that stuff.
yeah.
And I'm like, oh. And I'm like, hey, why didn't I go party? And then I'm like, oh, that's probably because I wasn't as I wasn't like safe and confident in myself as I am now. It's like, okay, it's cool,
I also kind of
but it
feel
makes
like the sexual last aspect um, makes it so that like I'm thinking about my situation where it's like I was hanging out with Nick or some other situations in my life where it's like when I do that sort of spontaneous like letting loose sort of thing afterwards and sometimes during I'll start having doubts as to whether or not it's the right thing to do. And regardless, I think the thing that pisses me off is regardless of whether or not it comes down to a judgment of right or wrong, I still have the feeling that something's off simply because I'm outside of that more natural comfort zone of um, having a handle on things, I guess, in some ways. It's like
right.
I want to take things more at a pace, and when I'm moving so fast that things are just sort of flying everywhere, and I'm just like, in the moment more so or something like that, then I'm like, oh fuck, what was that? Like I was totally out of control like that.
Yeah, there's that. I think there's just my personal like feel that there's an understanding of the kind of the mutual exclusivity of the two, and especially if you're not really conscious of the kind of fight there, then I think it can be really uncomfortable. You're like you're not quite sure
Yeah.
Like you can feel as something is not quite lining up the way you think,
Do
normally does. And
Do you feel
I'm very
like
on or off. That's what I've learned. Is like I can, but I'm also aware of that, and so I have to be careful about it. Like if I
yeah
make a decision to like do a thing or be whatever, it's like then it's over, and it's like
yeah
I may ponder it for a long time, but once the actual decision is made, and I
yeah
don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
yeah I kind of well, I mean, like that one night hanging out with Nick, it's like I went from, yeah, I'm not doing anything tonight, to vacuuming his kitchen. um it's not like in that situation, like I'm trying to look back and trying to really pinpoint, okay, what did I regret specifically? And it's like it's not
right,
necessarily coming down to specifics, like, okay, this was wrong or this was bad or something like that. It was just that vibe of being outside of that comfort zone. And I wouldn't quite describe it just as a comfort zone, as in that the only thing that was at stake was comfort or something like that. It was like a psychological dissonance. It was
yeah,
like what the fuck sort of existence is this? Like what like I'm experiencing some other realm of yeah, I'm not just talking about because Diet Coke was involved. Talking like, because I'll have it in other situations where things are super intense or something like that, and it's like I find it difficult to get enraptured by anything because my brain's constantly like, oh, let's put this into context or put that into context, or what am I doing right now? What's going on here? Why am I doing this? Um, so it's like, I guess, well, other people are sort of getting lost in things and looking for that sort of what describes as that sexual instinct sort of fusion with things or people. Just that aspect of getting lost. I'm like, I've been lost my whole life. I want to fucking get found.
yeah. No, I get that. Because I don't. I see that in people, and I've never really. Yeah, not on any sort. Yeah, I don't really get it. I don't do it.
Something I read that was interesting was talking about these sexual last types and how like the the energy of the sexual instinct. I can't remember the particulars of what they said, but it generated this thought in my mind that I was like, oh, that's a really interesting aspect, because it's like talking about how, like, for the social self-preservation, I think it takes on the more of like like sacred, like symbolism or things like that, like this energy that's more that, like, in non-sexual types gets manifested more like in their bodies or like their being or something like that.
Right.
I think that the sexual last takes on more of an abstract, uh, takes more of an abstract form where you're finding yourself applying symbolism to, like applying symbolism, or possibly uh, this sort of desire for merging or something like that, but you attribute it to situations of context, or like issues of physicality, like the land or like totems or something like that.
Stuff.
um like, I guess using things as placeholders for this sort of merging thing, which I think
That's
is,
interesting. Actually, that's very interesting.
yeah, it's like that is kind of cool. And I think it's funny because earlier on, like, I would have thought the sexual instinct, it's like, oh, that's the thing that makes me really interested in, like, sort of tribal type stuff, or the idea of totems, or the idea of like land spirits, or like all these different things, like especially when I was a teenager and I was starting to branch out and learn about different uh, religions, or systems of thought, or different things like that. I noticed certain symbolism or ideas were particularly uh, impressive to me, and like different archetypes.